right, so we're going to do a test review over these sections, and there's also a part of your test that's a review section from Chapter 7, couple other review questions. So we're going to go over everything so you're familiar with what review concepts are going to be on there, but it's only a really small part of your test. The bulk of your test is over 8.1 through 8.3. Okay, so the first section is going to cover your domain and range questions. You'll be given a set of ordered pairs, and it says find the domain and range. The domain is your x values, the range is your y values, and then you say, is it a function? Yes or no? Okay. You guys remember what makes it a function? No, not the range. If the input, the domain, has different values, all I care about is the domain. If the range repeats, I don't care about that. It's only the domain. All right, go ahead and fill these in. All right, so when you list them, it has to be in what? It's got to be in numerical order. So for your domain, if you just write them how they're listed, they're not going to be in numerical order. You have to go -4, -1, 1, and 2. Okay, that's going to be your domain. What's your range? 2, 3, 4. Remember, do not write the repeated range numbers or domain numbers more than once. Is it a function? Yes, it is. It is a function. Even though the range value of 3 repeats, that doesn't matter. My input values do not repeat, so it is a function. All right, you also have 2 questions on your quiz where you're going to tell whether the ordered pair is a solution to the equation. Let's see. That's exactly what the directions say. Tell whether the ordered pair is a solution to the equation. Okay, so where do I plug in -4? In for x. Where do I plug in 3? In for y. All right, so 3 times -4 plus 2 times 3 equals 16. Now, here's something that I saw yesterday. You're making the substitutions, but you're not telling me what the total is. I need to know the total. So it's going to be -6 does not equal 16. No. Make sure you write me the total. That's why I drew an arrow to it. All right, everybody clear on this? 2 questions, 10 points. So we're 10 points on your test. Okay. All right, next one, function form. This one is one that needs a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of work. Okay, all I'm going to say in the directions is write the equation in function form. All right, so we need to solve for y to get it in function form. So what do we do first? No. We add 6x. We're solving for y, so we need to get everything else to the other side. We add 6x to both sides. Now I get 8y equals, and which term comes first? The variable, 6x. That's function form. You say, why? Because that's function form, okay? So 6x plus 48. Now what do? Divide everything by 8. And make sure you reduce. So 6 over 8 reduces to 3/4. X plus 6. And on these questions on your test, that's going to be it. I'm not going to ask you to graph it. I'm just going to ask for 2 equations to be written in function form. Okay? 2 equations in function form. All right, number 4. Now use intercepts. And what I want you to do is find the x and the y intercept, and then I want you to graph it, but just do a real rough graph. You don't even have to number the lines or anything. I just want you to kind of generally place the points where they would go on the graph. Okay, on your test tomorrow, it will be numbered, obviously. On your quiz corrections tonight, what happens if you miss the graph on your quiz? It needs to be graphed on graph paper. If it's not on graph paper, it's going to be completely wrong. And depending on, which question it is, it could be up to -10. If you skip a problem, it's -10. All right, on quiz corrections. So don't skip any. We do all of our graph corrections on graph paper. All right, so go ahead and find your x and your y intercept for number 4, and then do a rough sketch of the graph. So your intercepts, this is a really big part of the test. This is a very important part, so that's why it's worth so many points. So your x-intercept is going to be worth 5 points. For you to find your x-intercept and graph it correctly, did you get x equals -8 for your x-intercept? So for you to graph it, or tell me x equals -8, and then graph it on the graph, that's 5 points. And then for y, for you to find the y-intercept and graph it, that's another 5 points. Okay? So that's going to be 10 points total. And you can just see that I did a rough graph. But there's something different about this graph that I've been meaning to talk to you guys about, and I meant to mention it the other day, so I'm mentioning it now. All right? With these graphs, you know how we've always, on graph paper, we draw a line straight down the middle and straight across the middle. We number it out to what? We always number it out to 8. Okay? Well, what if you don't have any positive numbers to graph? Like on this one. All I was graphing was 2 negative numbers. Is it necessary to really even label any positive numbers? No, it's not. So in this case, even if I was doing this on graph paper, I would only number the numbers that were in the negative because those are the ones that I'm graphing. Does that make sense? Okay, so then also that frees up more space in there so you don't have basically dead space on your graphs, all right, where you're just like writing numbers out and there's nothing that goes up there. Okay, so we're at the point now in the year where we can start moving the axis up and down, right and left, depending on what we're graphing. So it's going to be different every time. That's why we don't start that way. Does that make sense? So if I started the year teaching you, oh yeah, you can move the axis up and down and left and right, you would have been like, what are you talking about, right? But now that we're getting farther in the year, we're getting to the point where you can start doing that some more. Okay, so now you're going to graph 2 equations. Again, this is a really big part of your test, using a table. So I'm going to specifically say, graph the equation using a table. Make sure it's in function form, which these will be. Okay, graph the equation using a table now. Not the intercepts, but now we're using a table. Can I use my standard set or custom? Standard. Why? Why can I use standard? Okay, because the number connected to x is a whole number, so I can use my standard set, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. How do I come up with my y values? I plug them in for x into the equation. So 4 times -2 minus 4 is -12, -8, -4, 0, 4. What do I do with these numbers? What do I do with them? Now I'm going to plot them on a graph. Okay? So I had, some papers yesterday. This is what they did. They just plotted their points. What did they forget to do? Draw a line through them. Okay? So this is not perfect because I didn't even number it, but this is just a rough sketch of what this line would look like on a graph. Now we're going to transition over to the review part of your test. Okay, I'm going to tell you exactly what types of questions are going to be on your test tomorrow for the review. Remember, these are not the same point value as the questions from the big part of the test. All right, so you have 2% problems. What percent of 200 is 70? You can either use a proportion or the percent equation to solve these problems. Okay, so this is the proportion. 70 over 200 equals P over 100. Okay, that's what we call the percent proportion. Percent equation is 70 equals 200P. Okay. If you did cross products with proportion, you should have got 200P equals 7,000. Divide and you get 35%. If you did the equation, you divide by 200 and then change the decimal over to a percentage. Either way, it's 35%. Who got 35%? Who got 35%? Very good. Okay, so 2 questions down. You also have 2 questions for the percent of change. It's going to say, find the percent of change, then tell me if it's an increase or a decrease. Okay, so 2 parts. Find the percent of change, then tell me whether it's an increase or a decrease. Okay, what is the formula for percent of change? Over ORG. What does ORG stand for? AOC is amount of change. ORG is the original amount. So subtract the two numbers to get 60, and then what do you divide by? 80. 75%. Is it an increase or decrease? Well, how do you know? Because I went from 80 to 140. Original to new, it went up. It's an increase. All right, you have one. So you have two of the percent of change. You have one simple interest. So you need to figure out which of the two formulas you're going to use. Use the simple interest formula to solve for the unknown value. Okay, this is one question on your test. And like I said, the review questions aren't worth as much as the regular test questions. But it's still really important that you remember how to do these. Would I use the formula I equals PRT? No. Why? There's no interest, okay? And I need to use a formula that has an A value in it. So my formula is A equals P times 1 plus RT. And T is in parentheses. Okay? So now I just plug in my numbers, right? 2,500 equals P, which I don't know. P is not percent. P is not percent. P is principal. Times 1 plus, what value would I plug in for R? 0.03. 0.03 times T. All right, go ahead and finish it up and solve for P. So when we simplify what's in parentheses, 1 plus 0.03 times 4, what do we get? 1.12, right? Did you get 1.12? Where does the P go? Would it go P times 1.12 or 1.12 P? 1.12 P. The P comes after because it's the variable. Now what do I do to solve for P? Divide both sides by 1.2. $2,232.14. Okay? You can do it. A lot of you got this right on Chapter 7 test. Okay? We've got to hang on to that knowledge. All right. Then you have, now this one's a throwback. It's simple. I mean, we've done stuff way more complicated than this. Simplify the expression. Don't solve it. Simplify it. Okay? Simplify it. Okay, can I combine what's inside the parentheses? Can I combine that? Woo! You okay? All right. Okay, can I combine it? No. X plus 2 cannot be added together. They're not like terms. So what do I do to get rid of the parentheses? I have to multiply by negative 2. I have to distribute. Negative 2 times x is what? Negative 2x. Negative 2 times 2 is negative 4 plus 5. Is there anything that I can combine? Negative 4 plus 5 is 1. Okay? All right. Yes, simplify expressions. All right, what about this one? Solving inequalities. We've been solving equations, but that inequality sign we haven't seen in a couple weeks, right? So solve the inequality. I seem to remember some type of a rule, don't say it out loud, when there's a negative with that variable. Seem to remember something. Okay, so go ahead and just solve the inequality. For now, just solve it. Don't graph it yet. Okay, go ahead and solve the inequality. Okay, so we're solving this like a two-step equation, except it's an inequality. So remember, if I'm solving for x, I have to get everything to the other side. So I move what's not connected to my variable first. Okay, we've been talking about that even in Chapter 8. So subtract 4 from both sides, and 2x is greater than 8. I divide by what? Negative 2. And my rule says if I have to divide by a negative, what happens? The thing switches. Yes. The inequality switches. Just don't write an equal sign. That'll be good. x is less than negative 4, okay, go ahead and graph your solution now in a number line. Graph it on a number line. Okay, go ahead and graph it. You have one of these. Okay, on my number line, I've got negative 4 in the middle. What two numbers to the left? The farther I get from 0, negative 5, negative 6, and then to the right, negative 3, negative 2. Open or close dot? Open. Arrow going left or right? To the left, because I read my variable first. X is less than negative 4. All right, last question. We're solving an equation that has variables on both sides of the equal sign. Variables on both sides of the equal sign. So remember what we learned when we had variables on both sides. We have to move one of them. Which one do we move? Technically, it doesn't matter, but you have to get your variables on one side and everything else on the other side. All right, so let's see who can remember. Okay, so which one would you move? Would you move the negative 3x over or the 6x over the other way? Negative 3x, because we want to move the lesser of the two numbers. So we add 3x, and then we subtract 9 over to the other side, and now we get 27 equals 9x. I know we kind of just ran through that, but are you following me? Okay, so I added 3x to the right side, and because I'm moving the x to the right, now I'm going to move the 9 over to the left, and then divide both sides by 9, and x equals 3. Okay, so in the review section, one of the questions will be your bonus. The other ones will count, but only a fraction of the points as in the main part of the test. So this is kind of like a quarter 3, somewhat of a review, and then obviously the main bulk of the test will be over 8.1 through 8.3. If you understand that, you are ready for your test tomorrow.